News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. Traders are adjusting their bets on the Fed's next move after a big surprise from the January jobs report. 130,000 new jobs added in the month, twice as many as economists expected. Claudia Sahm is a former Fed economist, now with New Century Advisors.
We got the best possible outcome today. We knew these revisions were coming, and again, we can talk about what's behind them, but to see the most recent readings, we've got some lift in the payrolls in January. It's just 1 month, but we got some lift, and the unemployment rate ticked down.
It ticked down to 4.3%. Diane Swank is a chief economist at KPMG.
What we're seeing is a record break between the share of profits going to wealth holders versus the amount of going to wages. And I think that's where the bulk of this is. You're seeing the productivity gains accrue to the owners of capital as opposed to workers.
The report also included benchmark revisions to 12 months of jobs numbers through last March. That erased 862,000 jobs, more than expected. Markets are now pushing back bets on the next Fed rate cut from June to July. That, in turn, moved treasuries lower. We check the markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 up 0.1%, NASDAQ down 0.3%, the Dow up 0.1%, the 10-year Treasury yield at 4.15%, and the 2-year yield at 3.49%. Checking Bitcoin, it is down 3.7%, hovering around $66,000. Shares of Kraft Heinz are little changed at this hour after CEO Steve Cahillane said plans to split in two are on hold indefinitely. He says the company will invest $600 million in marketing, research and development, improving its products and reducing some prices, and it plans to launch healthier options. The Congressional Budget Office is warning the U.S. is on an unsustainable fiscal path, increasing its estimate of deficits for the coming decade by $1.4 trillion because of President Trump's 2025 tax law and immigration policies. Now, the CBO projects the increased revenue from tariffs will reduce deficits by $3 trillion, but that will not be enough to cover the cost of the administration's immigration enforcement actions and the extension of Trump's 2017 tax cuts. Attorney General Pam Bondi was reprimanded by Democratic lawmakers for using the Justice Department to target enemies of President Trump. Bondi was criticized for her record, particularly on handling the files of the late financier Jeffrey Epstein, including redactions of the so-called Epstein files. Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler says the files are there, but the Justice Department hasn't really done anything about them.
How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating? Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question. No, I'm not going to get in the gutter with these people.
The answer to my question, how many of Epstein's co-conspirators as she indicted, is zero.
Bondi, backed by Republicans on the panel, touted her department's record on enforcement against undocumented immigrants who've been accused of committing crimes. President Trump is expected to issue an executive order that could aid the coal industry by providing funds to recommission and upgrade coal plants. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum says the U.S. is facing an AI arms race with China.
We need more power. We need energy addition. The way to have energy addition is to stop getting rid of the stuff that already works. And of course, that includes our fossil fuel baseload. In the PGM market, 70% of the power was coming from hydrocarbons, during those storms. I mean, America and the world is dependent on it and is going to be in the long future.
Interior Secretary Doug Burgum on Bloomberg Surveillance. And President Trump's energy chief has arrived in Venezuela to meet with the nation's new leader and assess its energy infrastructure. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern is traveling with Energy Secretary Chris Wright.
What's the message from the business community? Have they been calling you? Are they excited to come back in? Or are they still a little bit concerned?
Tremendous, absolutely overwhelming interest to come into Venezuela. You know, Americans are enterprising capitalists. We produce oil and gas all around the world. So, of course, the interest there is tremendous.
Energy Secretary Chris Wright speaking with Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern in Venezuela. President Trump is meeting at the White House with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who arrived this morning. Netanyahu is pushing for expanded Iran talks, including limits on Iran's ballistic missile system and support for militant groups. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says he's accepted a U.S. offer to host another round of talks to end Russia's war, with negotiators likely to discuss the issue of territory. A U.S. proposal to to set up a free economic zone as a buffer in the eastern Donbass region is on the agenda, but Zelensky says both Ukraine and Russia are skeptical about that. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says she does not believe President Trump will withdraw his country from the USMCA trade deal. Sheinbaum made those remarks during a press conference today. Sources tell Bloomberg Trump is privately musing about whether to exit the trade pact between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, which is set for a mandatory review July 1st. The FAA has reopened airspace around El Paso, Texas, after announcing a 10-day closure that grounded flights in the city. The FAA made the decision in response to drones that the Defense Department is flying in that area as part of an operation against Mexican drug cartels. The regulator determined there's no threat to commercial travel. All flights will resume as normal. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.